Hey everybody, welcome to HR Tech Talks. I hope that you're having a great day, great week so far, and that there's good things ahead. I'm looking forward to today's conversation, but as you're chiming in today, listening with us live, go ahead and pop your name in the chat. Let us know where you're connecting in from. We love to see where people are listening, connecting in, and just enjoying the conversations we have here on HR Tech Talks. I'm Ben Eubanks, as you well know, and come here every single week sharing stories, examples, case studies, and just highlighting how companies are serving the HR, the talent, the learning space. And today is no exception to that. So today we actually have the team over at Bravely connected with us. We're going to have them on talking about coaching. We're going to talk about how coaching is not mentoring. They're not the same thing. We're going to talk about what those are. We're going to dive into, actually, I'm going to share a research tidbit with you in a little bit about some of the new data we have coming out next week on the priorities for coaching and how that's a major focus for employers today. So without any further ado, I want to go ahead and welcome Sarah here. She is the co-founder and president of Bravely. Sarah, welcome aboard.
Hi, Ben. Thanks for having me.
I am so glad to have you here. Go ahead and give the audience a little bit of an insight into who you are and what you do before we dive into some of the fun stuff.
Yeah. So, as Ben said, I'm Sarah Sheehan, president and co-founder of Bravely. I actually started my career in HR and spent over a decade working on that side of the house, as I like to call it. I worked at companies like Sirius before they merged and became SiriusXM, Coach, and a startup in New York called the Gilt Group that actually grew to be quite large. And it was there that I did a complete career switch and ended up moving into a sales role and grew over the course of 3 years into a head of sales responsible for $60 million in revenue, 65 persons distributed sales org. And I share both of those experiences because it really set the foundation for founding Bravely, because I spent so much time early in my career really thinking about employee engagement and retention and understanding all the levers and resources that we can pull and offer in an HR and people role. And then when I moved over and was responsible for a sales organization, that's where I really understood the practice of all of this and how important it was to have the right resources and culture, honestly, to drive performance. And all of this truly did. It's where I met my co-founder, first of all, at Gil. But it's where I started to understand how important it is to provide people the opportunity to get an intervention or a moment of support when they need it, to really drive forward in their roles. And that's why Bravely was born, where it came from, this understanding that we all have these moments where we need support. And in today's world, technology drives everything on demand, right? We can get a doctor, we can get food, we can get everything delivered to our door, except when it comes to our work, the place where we spend the majority of our time, we don't have access to get what we need in the moment that we need it often.
Goodness, that set up so many good things that I can't wait to dive into this. One of the things I told you before we started actually recording, I told you I was going to share some snippets of our research with you because it would set you up so well for this conversation. And one of the things I want to tell you, we asked employers. We just finished a study of 1,000 different companies in North America and asked them, what are your priorities, right, around talent development and growing your skills, your people. And the number one thing that they said was coaching and mentoring. We kind of pulled those together. We'll talk about the separately in a minute, but both those together are the biggest priority for companies above, right, all the other flashy things, AI and reskilling and all the other fun things we want to talk about. Coaching was number one. On top of
Wow.
that, on top of that, and this won't surprise you at all, but it might surprise the audience a little bit. When we asked learners, we also surveyed 1,000 individuals who are working in these roles. We said, what is the best way for you to develop a new skill that you need to do your job? And they
Mm.
said, okay, number one, like some experience. I want to do it. But number two, right behind that was coaching. I want to be able to be supported by someone who knows where I need to be going, who has that expertise, that forethought, and they can help guide me along that way. And so I thought that was so much fun to when the data on this is coming out next week, and it was so exciting for me to see we this week get a chance to talk about all the fun around coaching. So that sets you up so well. I want to hear from you. there are so many different ways coaching can be applied, right? You
Yeah.
use the word intervention a minute ago, and sometimes we think of that as a negative thing. Sometimes it can be that you find a flaw or an issue that needs correcting, but sometimes it's just, I'm on a good path and I want to accelerate that. Talk about how people are using the platform in that sort of context. Is it one way or the other? Or is it kind of just a broad mix?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I just want to clarify what we've done with Bravely is we've democratized coaching, right? So typically coaching has been available to only the most senior level executives or leadership level employees at a company. And what we're trying to do here is scale coaching, and not trying, we've done it. So that everyone at every level of every background, because as you can imagine, the past model really prevented a diverse set of people to have access to Bravely. And now, through our platform, we typically only offer Bravely to the entire employee population of companies. So we work with companies like Pinterest, Zillow Group, Twilio, Yelp, the New York Times. All of their employees have access to Bravely, which I think is quite different. And to your point, I think, well, funny enough, like coaching again historically was always seen as something that was punitive, which is so interesting. It's like, you're doing a terrible job, here's a coach.
Yes.
Um, and that's no longer the approach. So to what you were saying earlier, a large percentage of people are coming to Bravely because they want to get to the next level in their career. An interesting statistic is that in the past year, we've all been talking a lot about stress and burnout and the impact of the pandemic on employees. And we've seen huge spikes, 700% increase in sessions around stress and burnout. But at the same time, we've seen people still wanting to figure out how they get to the next level. They don't want the stress and burnout that they're experiencing to prevent them from growing or developing or getting that next promotion, which I think is what's been most clear to us, is that those two can coexist. And so people come to us to talk about things like a one-on-one that they have tomorrow with their boss that just got scheduled, and they need to prepare for it, or bounce ideas off of someone. Or it's longer term thinking around, like, I want to get to a manager level, help me think through the goals and steps that will take me there.
I love that. I'm thinking about the times where I had that last minute kind of just in time moment where I needed a coach in my career, and you probably could think of half a dozen yourself where, like, man, if I could have hit a button then and been able to connect with a coach and get that support, that outcome might have been different, or I might have done even better in that moment. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's thrilling. That 700% stat kind of got me. I would have expected a jump, but that's pretty wild to think about how many people are looking for support with that. One of the things I wanted to ask you, and I kind of teed it up earlier, is we use the words coaching and mentoring like interchangeably often,
Mm-hmm.
and that's not what they're not supposed to be that way. So correct me if I'm wrong. I'm going to throw out my definitions, or as I understand it, and I want to hear from you because this is
Great.
your world you live in. Mentoring, a little more informal. It is mostly someone telling you or guiding you or telling, like, here's what's working for me, or here's what works, here's the things you can pick up. Whereas coaching can be a little more of a formal relationship. Obviously, it can be ad hoc, as you've mentioned, but it can be in more of a formal relationship. But the best coaches that I've seen are much better asking questions, getting you to reflect, getting you to think introspectively. And it's less of a just go and do A, B, and C, and you'll solve this problem. It's how do you think is the best? Why do you think that approach is going to work out? Kind of guiding you through that. Is that accurate? Am I off? Is that partially correct? What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think these are two different practices that should both exist, but are
Yeah.
quite different. So, as you
Yes.
said, it's that on demand aspect that you definitely probably can't accomplish. Maybe you can if you have a close relationship with your mentor. Um, but with Bravely, essentially, the fact that the coach that you're working with is this neutral person who doesn't really have all of the information about what's going on actually ends up working to your advantage because they don't have any skin in the game. They're not going to steer you in any direction because they know that the VP, and in some cases, this is very helpful, which is why I say, like, the two should exist. But what happens in our coaching session is, one, there's a methodology that's being applied. This person has deep experience in coaching, and they understand what's happening inside the workplace. They understand those dynamics. And so they're helping you apply these fundamentals of coaching to what's happening to you personally inside the organization. And the fact that it's confidential and neutral allows you, as the person being coached, to really open up and share more than you ever probably would, even with your mentor. There's some level of, when you're talking to a mentor, they're usually at a higher level inside the organization, or there's someone that you really respect and you want to earn their approval.
Yes.
And that just throws a huge wrench into everything. You're not able to actually lay all your cards on the table and talk about your insecurities or the challenges, the difficulties that you're facing. And so for that reason alone, I believe that coaching is incredibly different. And there's also just a ton of science and methodology applied to it that you're not going to get with a mentor. And I say this all the time. We were talking earlier about the fact that we spend all of our time at work and we don't have a resource necessarily to help us in these moments, or these milestones that really matter to our experience. And, often we're only left with, it's either you go to your manager or HR right away, which none of us do. And so we're left with the people in our personal life. I'm someone, thank God, that started my career in HR. So I have a network of people who give me pretty solid advice. My father's also an employment lawyer. Not that most people need a lawyer, but he's just somebody that thinks very differently, and challenges me to think about all the other people involved. But the rest of us go to the people in our personal lives, our friends, our family, who are well-meaning, but normally just add that fuel to the fire that's already burning and don't really help us think about the perspective of the other people involved and how I actually produce the outcome I'm looking for, which may require me to behave in a very different way than I've been behaving.
One of the things that comes to mind as you're talking through this is I'm kind of curious who these coaches are, right? How are you recruiting them, or what sort of background do they have? Obviously, it sounds like they have to have some kind of experience doing this. It's not just someone who's says, "Okay, I'll be a coach," but they have some sort of name behind that, because you're putting them with someone. You said moments that matter, right? These critical moments. It could be the big career milestone. It could be that big promotion conversation, or I've got to head off a potential issue. My boss thinks, whatever, 100 different scenarios. But who are the people that are actually giving this coaching advice? Because if I hit that button, I think the people are kind of curious out there, like, who am I going to be connected to?
Yeah. These people, these coaches, I always say that they're like the center of our universe. Like, they're our product. We have a ton of technology, but at the end of the day, the connection between this coach and employee is what matters. So we take great care in onboarding our coaches. We've been really successful actually in building a referral network. So a lot of our coaches have gotten their master's degrees together in coaching or organizational development, and then they refer other people within their programs. And it's just kind of like taken off from there, which is great because referrals are always the best hires. On average, our coaches have 11 years of experience in coaching alone. 65% of them have higher degrees in a master's degree or a PhD in related like they're practitioners in related fields. Over 20% of them have worked in leadership roles prior to coaching. So you see this a lot. Either people have worked in roles such as people or HR, and then they've decided to go on to become a certified coach. And then you've also seen this in people who've had senior leadership roles and are ready to do something different. So we thoroughly vet them. So our process is pretty rigorous. We put them through a lot of mock sessions and make sure that they're able to deliver the methodology that we end up sharing with them in practice.
That is so much fun, and I'm glad to hear you say that. By the way, right? The technology enables this, but it's really about connecting someone with one of those amazing, trusted experts that can support them whenever they need it, where that moment arises.
I will say, interestingly, when we first launched Bravely 4 years ago, there was a trend in HR tech in particular to automate everything. And so we kept getting this feedback that it was like, oh, the human component, we don't know if this is actually going to work, which we firmly disagreed with.
Yes.
And 4 years later, those
And proven.
companies, yes, that were just focused on automation no longer exist. And I think it's just a real testament to, one, how essential the work of HR is. Like I think the last year we saw this trend before, but the idea that the chief people officer, the CHRO needs a seat at the table has also been verified. And the fact that you cannot automate all of the, human components of work. It's
Mhm.
just, it doesn't actually add the kind of value that one would think.
It's funny you say it that way because I've written a book on AI for HR, and I completely agree with you. By the way, so all that to say, I still
Mm-hmm.
agree with you here. One of the big points that I make in there is that automation doesn't really create new value. It's what we do with that time, right? If you're automating in other areas of your business and you use that time to pour into your people, that's where the real value is created, right? That's where the new things come out of it, the new things are
Yes.
created, and that excites me to hear you say it, put it that way, because that's kind of validating. But it's fun to see. I'm thinking of the moments again, thinking about those critical moments in my career. I don't want a robot coach. And Melinda in the chat actually earlier said, right, don't send me a YouTube video as the answer for this critical situation because I could have watched that myself. I could have found that myself. I want you to give me
Right.
some advice that I can't find there, right? I want to be paired
That's
with a
right.
coach who can guide me through. You mentioned the framework, right? Guide me through and help me think through what the best solution is for me, not some generic link on the internet that may or may not actually answer my question, or it might make the situation worse if I follow that advice. Who knows?
That's right. And the tools and the technology should just be making the role of, in our case, the coach or the employee or the client should be producing either really incredible outcomes, the technology, or making the experience that much more incredible. And so one of the things that is probably the highest value prop to our clients is the fact that we anonymize the data from our sessions. So we're able to actually provide a data set that doesn't exist. I mean, everyone obviously typically does a survey, which is great. Again, essential parts or historically have been essential parts of an HR toolkit. But the data that we're delivering, Ben's coming to Bravely for a reason that is not prompted by you, or the data that's being collected was not a question that you asked of Ben. He's holding a session talking about the difficulty in his relationship with his manager. Here are the reasons. He's a flight risk. All of this does not get associated with you, Ben, but it gets aggregated in data that gets returned back to the organization around, people in these roles of this identity are really struggling with their managers. And this is just one example of a piece of data that we can return back to an organization that is highly actionable and incredibly valuable because they wouldn't be able to get it anywhere else.
We did a study a few years ago that one of the biggest takeaways I came out with, it was around employee surveys, things like that. And the biggest takeaway I got from that was if you're not average, you're not heard, essentially,
Mm-hmm.
because they report out and say, well, 70% of our people are this. But once you break that down one layer below that and say, okay, what about job roles? Or what about geography? Or what about gender? Or about any number of things we can cut that by? Suddenly it gets fractions of a fraction to start cutting that. And so the big takeaway was if you are not in that average bucket on whatever they report out on, those top level
Mm-hmm.
findings, you might as well not respond at all. And so
Yeah.
having those kind of insights, allowing companies to dive into that and to see what sort of issues are there, what sort of opportunities are there to serve, that's exciting.
Yeah.
Can I ask you another question?
Please.
Okay, because it kind of brought up one thing I wanted to ask you about. You talked about, you teased it earlier, I think, or maybe it was just my head. I can't remember. Either way, I'm gonna set you up for it. You and I both know from our own experience. I worked in HR for years before I stepped into the role I'm in now, whatever you want to call this, and we know that in general, the data show that right, men are more likely to promote themselves. Men are more likely to ask for other opportunities. Men are more likely to ask for other resources. And in general, on average, again, women are not. Giving equitable access to a coach, what vision do you have for the women, the people of color in the workplace, for giving them equitable access to the resources that Bravely offers when in the past, whether it was just by default or by design or just they didn't raise their hand because they weren't sure. They didn't get those things in the past.
Yeah, this is probably one of the most exciting things as the founder of Bravely that I see us being able to support people in. When we first founded the company, my co-founder and I are both, I'm a woman, he's a gay man. We both have experienced being marginalized in the workplace on some level. And we felt like this was a perfect offering to support DIB efforts inside an organization. At the time, there was zero budget for it. Now, coming out of the last year, that all has changed, and Bravely is squarely centered inside of a lot of our clients' strategies around DIB, because just merely providing a resource to everyone across the organization that supports them individually in the moment that they need it can contribute to their sense of feeling included or belonging at their organization. Um, the other stats that we see just in general across the board is that 94% of people after a Bravely session feel more positive. 88% of them feel like they've gained a skill. 91% of them are more likely to take an action. So if you just look at those statistics and you apply them to underrepresented minorities, and the fact that they would be now more willing because they've gained the confidence to go and ask for what they need, they've developed a skill to be able to go and either communicate or do their job better, and then obviously feel more positive about their organization or their situation. Like, that is just hands down the vision for Bravely, is obviously to support everyone equitably, but to be able to do that for those that have struggled to raise their voices more than others is a dream come true.
You use the word confidence there, right? They get the confidence to do this, but you said you can also measure if they're gaining new skills too. So not just confidence, but also competence in those things that they need in order to
Absolutely.
advance and grow and succeed. That is incredible. I'm I'm visualizing kind of the playing field, kind of leveling in my head as we're talking through how this works and the kind of opportunities that are there. That's just incredible. So you mentioned some stats earlier on things like burnout, on things
Mhm.
like developing a skill to succeed and level up. What else has been interesting for you as you watch how people and how companies are kind of leveraging what Bravely can do for them?
Mhm. I think it's one, it's the fact that the clients that we support are really taking note and um, digesting these emergent trends that we share with them, and putting them into practice in terms of their strategy going forward. I think that's we've always known that this data set would be sort of the backbone of our business and create the change that we seek, right? Because all it can do at the end of the day is benefit the employees that are employed at the organizations that we support. I also think over the last couple of years, what's been so interesting, and you mentioned this earlier, is that people use Bravely for completely different reasons than most would have thought. I think in the beginning, all any of the people that we were talking to in HR and people roles were concerned with, like, the worst case edge case that you could
Yes.
imagine. And that's just not what employees use us for. They're coming to improve their skills, improve their relationships, get to the next level, set goals for themselves, become better leaders. Like, the things that all of us, when we're struggling at work, we know that we can grow and develop a little bit further to improve our performance, and that's what they're coming to us for. So it's incredibly exciting to see that shift. It's not even a shift that started out. I think it was more of an assumption that was being made, and now all the data points to, like, this is actually a really proactive resource that drives all positive outcomes across the board.
One of the things I love writing about and talking about is career mobility, how people move, right, and how they change
Mm-hmm.
roles, how they advance. And there's so much data that say that that's important. That's a great resource. And one of the fun things about the research we did earlier this year is we found that when companies are looking at measuring the effectiveness of that, the number one way they're measuring the effectiveness of like an internal mobility sort of strategy is greater diversity throughout the organization. And so I'm seeing some of the connections in that data, the ways come to measuring that, and some of the things we're talking about here. If someone's a person of color and they haven't had access to those resources, or they haven't been invested in, and now they have the chance to step up because they know, here's how I have executive presence, or here's how I can, you know, step into that or lead with the right data, or again, whatever that skill is they're picking up in those moments. That's I'm just seeing all those kind of points kind of coming together in my head about how this is giving companies. You ask anybody, any CEO, and they'll say, yes, we believe in DEI. That's important to us. What are you doing
Hmm.
about it? Like they start shifting in their chair a little bit, like not let's not make eye contact because some of them don't know. And
Yeah.
tools like Bravely give them a point, tip of the spear, to go and start solving for those issues and creating actionable and real solutions that not just, oh, that feels good, that feels nice, but as you're saying here, there's data behind it. You can actually measure this and see what's
Yeah.
happening.
It actually, I mean, I know that I'm the founder of the company, but it actually blows my mind that we have not had resources like this available. It's all fallen on the manager to be that coach player in a lot of cases. But the reality is just like historically, HR has also not been the right fit for people to go to because and and often this is unfounded, but people don't feel that security. They think that there's an alliance with the company first. um, the same is true for managers. You know, I work incredibly hard to create the opportunity and the psychological safety, as we hear that buzzword all the time, for the people that report to me to be able to come and talk about whatever's going on with them. But it's still a lot to ask someone to come and lay down all of the things that they're, you know, suffering with insecurity around, or not sure if they're performing well. And now the idea that you have this secret weapon that you can go to first, I think is just, it's going to change, I think transform the way that organizations perform.
That is incredible. Oh, excuse me, goodness, got all choked up there for a second. Okay, so everybody has listened into this. They've appreciated it. And we had a lot of good comments and conversation actually going on in the chat. If someone wants to learn more at Bravely, wants to connect, someone actually said, "How do I even become a coach?" Like, what's the best way to connect with Bravely overall and learn more?
Yeah. Well, you can go to workbravely.com, WORK, bravely.com, to learn more about what we do. I'm pretty sure we always have opportunities up for pros that you can apply to become a coach. We call them pros. You can always reach out to me. I'm simply Sarah, SARAH, at workbravely.com, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn. We're hiring for quite a few roles right now. We've quadrupled our business in the last year, so we're growing like gangbusters, and hiring a lot of people to support our growth so that we can support as many people as we possibly can in the future.
That is tremendous. Well, I have really enjoyed this conversation. I wanted to learn more about Bravely. Again, it was good timing with some of our new research coming out, and it gives me a great practical lens to look at that through. Right, the connections to diversity, equity, and inclusion, the connections to why coaching is such a big priority for employers, and some of the things that you're seeing there kind of jive with the data. So that's incredible. This has been so much fun for me. I appreciate you taking time out of your schedule for hanging out with us and for teaching us a little bit more about coaching.
So fun to talk to you, Ben. Thanks for having me.
Yes, ma'am. Goodness. I hope you all enjoyed that discussion with Sarah. Workbravely.com, as she said, her name. If you're on LinkedIn, right there in the description for this episode, you can click right over and connect with Sarah, tell you heard about her on HR Tech Talks, and you enjoyed hearing more and learning from her. I appreciate every one of you for hanging out with us today. I hope you got some good insights, some good ideas, and I look forward to catching you next time on HR Tech Talks. Have a great rest of your week.